What if I were to tell you you're being psychologically manipulated every time you check your phone, and it's literally rewiring how you see America? And these false perceptions are creating real division, real anger, and real consequences. I think it's safe to say at this point, we can't really understate how tense things feel for us here in the United States today. And a lot of people are wondering, are we entering kind of the final stages of the American experiment, right? And unfortunately, the way things are going, I'm really concerned that it's only going to get worse before it gets better for us. And so this episode is kind of my attempt to try and do something about it and bring some order out of the chaos and mayhem that we're seeing. Everywhere we look, we're seeing signs of a rising tension, a growing rift between us and our fellow countrymen within the United States, right? We see it in the news, in social media, on bumper stickers and flags and protests in our street just about every day now. And it feels like we're sliding closer and closer to violence, or feeling like our differences just can't be reconciled through peaceful political processes. And we're fundamentally having a contest for the spirit and soul of our nation, reaching a point of us versus them, or God forbid, us, the good and the righteous, versus them, the outright evil. But where's all this tension coming from? And what's driving and encouraging the rifts that we're seeing and feeling every day? This week, we're going to jump headfirst into this topic from a psychological and conflict analysis perspective. And it's going to be the first episode of several that I'm doing on our Divided States of America series. So let's dig into it. Welcome to the Renegade Institute. All right, so just about everyone can attest that things are feeling pretty bad right about now, and they seem to be looking bleaker and bleaker every day. But that's just the thing, right? Feeling, looking, seeming. These are all subjective determinations, right? These are perceptions that can be altered, influenced, or manipulated. So this begs us to ask, are things really as bad as it feels on the ground, on the streets of everyday America? Or is there something a little deeper and more nefarious going on here that's driving the division within our nation? This division, is it coming organically from within us? Is it a byproduct of who we are living our daily lives? Or is this division being fabricated, or even worse, orchestrated? To answer these questions, we first need to jump back and do a little foundation laying. So we're going to start by understanding something about human evolutionary psychology, and that's a thing called the negativity bias. Now, what is that? See, the negativity bias, it is a hardwired psychological trait for humans to have a strong psychological draw to information that causes anger, fear, and disgust. See, this hardwired effect, it's also known as the positive-negative asymmetry. And that basically means that bad events often have a far greater psychological impact on our mental state than the impact of an equally as powerful positive emotional event. A study by Dr. Rick Hansen showed that your brain processes negative information 5 times more intensely than it does of positive information. And another study by Dr. Stuart Stroka found that people who are shown identical news stories, one written from a positive frame and one written from a negative frame, will spend 16% more time reading the negative framed news story and will be able to remember it and recall specific details from it days later. So this process that's going on in our mind, right? It's an archaic evolutionary survival mechanism that helped keep us alive for millions of years as we clawed our way to the top of the food chain. But one of our distinct evolutionary advantages that we have over most other animals is our ability to communicate with each other, right? Where we can share and learn from the experiences of others that we ourselves didn't have to personally go through, endure, or learn through trial and error. So over time, humans who were more attuned to potential threats such as predators or hostile strangers we're more likely to survive and go on to procreate. We develop this need to know what animals, what situations, and what people and environments were a threat to us, right? We needed to learn things that were a danger and how we could avoid them so that we could go on to procreate and evolve as a species. And that's why we love watching true crime dramas, and we also love all the bad gossip that we learn about through our colleagues and classmates all the time, right? In our modern world, negative news and events are going to have a much stronger salience for us than positive ones. We're going to notice and experience and remember negative events far more often than we will positive ones. And this is supported by an MIT finding that showed that false news reports will actually spread 6 times faster than positive ones. And this is a massive factor contributing to our perception of the divisions that we're experiencing in our nation. We're genetically predisposed to overemphasize negative news while also being functionally blind to any of the good that's going on in the world. This is going to lead us to our second dimension that's kind of contributing to the perceptions of the division and the world kind of going to hell as we know it, right? And that's going to come from the availability heuristic. So the availability heuristic, it's basically a mental shortcut where people judge the likelihood or importance of an event based on how easily information about that event comes to their mind when they think about it. This leads to an overestimation of vivid, recent, or sensational events while underestimating less dramatic or less frequent ones. And this cognitive bias occurs because the ease of recalling the event is mistaken for the actual frequency or probability of the event occurring. So, what does this end up meaning for us? This basically means the more we hear about something happening, like plane crashes, like doors getting blown off, right? A plane's not landing correctly, the more we perceive it as actually occurring. For example, like when I say gun violence, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Well, for most people, it's going to be mass shootings, right? Even though mass shootings only make up about 2% of overall gun violence. 60% of it is going to be suicides. Another 30% of it is gang violence, and that's what makes up the mass majority of gun violence. But mass shootings tend to get far more coverage, which ends up leading us to perceiving them as being far more common than these other forms of gun violence. This then brings us to the third dimension that's affecting our perception of how bad things might be right now. And so to understand this one, we have to understand a statistics term known as the standard distribution curve and what actually ends up making it into the news in our daily life. So the standard normal distribution curve, basically what it is it's a symmetrical bell-shaped curve that is fundamental for understanding the probability and distribution of data in terms of various natural phenomenon. Events or phenomenon's frequency of occurrence is rated or represented by how high the line is along the y-axis, and the x-axis represents the phenomenon being measured. So I know that was kind of a lot. So for example, we're going to look at one of the standard distribution graph showing the average height for males in the United States. As you can see, the vast majority of males are going to be between 5'8" and 6 foot tall. And then we see a super steep drop off outside of that. And so like my little brother, who's 6'4" and all the way here on the edge of the standard distribution graph, shows that the likelihood of him being that tall was less than 2%. And the standard distribution curve holds true for an astounding number of natural phenomenon, from height to intelligence to political leaning and beyond. But this is where news and social media come in, right? So in order for something to be considered newsworthy, for it to be remarkable, it generally needs to be on the very edge of that standard distribution curve. It has to be something that doesn't occur very often in our normal experience, right? And so for me, standing at a solid 5'8", no one's ever asked me how tall I am, right? Because it's entirely unremarkable. There are millions of 5'8" individuals. But my little brother, being 6'4", because he is outside the norm on that standard distribution curve, he gets asked how tall he is all the time because it's a remarkable thing. So all these things that are occurring on every day, the good, the bad, everything that's going on, for the most part, they're all solidly within the norm of that standard distribution curve. So they never really make it into the news because they're just seen as unimportant or unremarkable. And then the further an event strays from the norm, the more likely it is to make the news, like those plane crashes, right? And events that would normally be considered extreme outliers in normal circumstances end up piling up in our social media feed in a way that makes them seem like commonplace, like shark attacks, right? So when we're sitting on that toilet, right, and we're scrolling the news or we're reading through our social media feeds, we're bombarded with hundreds of like 1 in a million random one-off events all in the span of several minutes. And this sets our baseline for what our current understanding of the world is at a really synthetically high level, leading us to believe that the whole world is falling apart literally everywhere all the time in the worst possible ways, because we're only hearing about the bad experiences that are popping up on the radar as being beyond the normal experience. So let's bring all three of these points together and see how they're contributing significantly to our perception of like the world's downward spiral, right? So fact 1, because of the negativity bias, we're naturally gonna feel more aware of events and occurrences that make us feel anger, fear, or disgust. Basically, every time we see it, we're giving ourselves like little micro traumas, right? And then fact 2, due to the availability heuristic, we will often conflate the number of instances in which we hear about an event with the actual odds of the event occurring within life, right? And so we generally perceive mass shootings as the main threat in gun violence, even though they only make up 2% of total gun deaths. And we're terrified of shark attacks, even though you're far more likely to be killed by a vending machine. And then fact 3, events only make the news if they are well outside of the norm in terms of occurrence on a standard distribution curve. So all the information that we're getting, 99% of the normal everyday stuff is never making it to the screen. It's never making it to those reports that we're reading, right? And 100% of the news that you do see is that like 1 in 1 million chance craziness that made it newsworthy in the first place. And so when these three factors come together, it creates kind of this perfect storm of a perception that things are worse than they've ever been and will only be getting worse from here. And it's not so much that the world is actually really bad, it's just that we all think it's really bad and all this really bad stuff is happening. And there's this kind of disparity between the distress we're perceiving and what is actually occurring in daily life. So for our practical application, what do we do about all this? How do we kind of push back against what is happening and the perceptions that like the whole world just seems to be going to hell, right? And as luck would have it, we also suffer from another challenge that can trace its roots back to our evolutionary design, only we understand this problem a little bit better, so it's giving us a framework of how we can view our current situation. And that problem is obesity, right? Just like our negativity bias, obesity has its roots in human evolution and survival. When we were clawing our way out of the mud, right, as early humans, we were generally living in environments of nutritional and caloric scarcity, like starvation and death from not having food killed millions. And so we ended up developing these psychological traits that kind of helped us overcome these challenges, such as cravings, such as addictions to sweets and sugary beverages, and predilections for overeating when in large groups, right? But as the times have changed, and with the advent of industrial farming, we now live in a time of nutritional and caloric surplus, right? And so if I'm not careful, I can easily eat 3 days worth of calories in a single sitting at the Olive Garden. So things like sodas, donuts, ultra-processed foods, what they're all doing is they're taking advantage of an evolutionary draw, causing us to consume far more calories than we actually need anymore. And like there's no more need for like a survival need for us to consume these kinds of food, right? And this is leading to decreased health outcomes across the world. Well, the very same is true of our media and information consumption, right? So just like with junk food, we need to carefully monitor our intake of junk media. We live in a time of unprecedented information surplus, right? If I want it, it's out there, it's immediate, and for the most part, it's pretty much free, right? At least with food, like I need to walk or drive to a store, I need to pay for my bag of Doritos before I can eat them. But can you imagine how bad obesity would be if you got a free donut just every time you flipped open your phone? Well, this is exactly what's happening with our media diet, right? Like we are being bombarded with every kind of media and stimulus that we can imagine, all at the flick of a fingertip. And this is what's happening is the average American is checking their phone 96 times per day. That's literally once every 10 minutes that you're awake. And so we're all suffering from like an information obesity. And we need to take a step back and look at like what a healthy media intake actually looks like. And just as our body gets a dopamine dump from candy and Diet Dr. Pepper and junk food, our neurology is pushing us to consume junk media at extremely high rates as well. And we need to view our information diet much in the same way that we do with our nutritional diet, by ensuring that we're getting a balanced diet every day while minimizing junk food and sugary drink intake. We need to shift our understandings to see that not all information is actually beneficial or healthy for us. And in many cases, like ultra-processed foods, the content we consume on our social media feeds has been engineered to be addictive, taking advantage of our evolutionary vulnerabilities, and is designed to maximize consumption by the end user, generally to the detriment and health and well-being of the consumer. So we need to ensure that we're using balanced information diet, that we're getting our intake from holistic sources that might not taste as good and might be more difficult to consume, kind of like vegetables, but that are essential for the nutrition of our mind, right? And I think we're only starting to begin to understand the importance of a healthy media intake. And it might be time for a lot of us to kind of go on a media diet. Remember, overconsumption of anything is unhealthy. Except for this channel. Renegade Institute is the superfood of the media world. Consume all of my content. Do it now. Obey. So in conclusion, now we kind of have a decent understanding of why things feel the way they are. But does this actually make things any better for us? See, more often than not, perception is reality, right? And other people's perception of the problem, whether it's real or not, is leading them to do real life things and make real life choices that are making the world worse for all of us. And unfortunately, unlike obesity, which largely the negative impacts only affect the individual who's overeating, a poor media diet of millions of Americans is leading to second and third order effects that are creating very real problems for all of us. And this is why it is so critical for you as a renegade to inform and educate your family, peers, and the people around you. Like, you're the tip of the spear, right? You can make the difference, and the world needs you now more than ever, because honestly, it is scary right now, right? But it doesn't have to be. So share the knowledge with everyone that you can, and maybe we can walk the world back from the edge a little bit. Okay. So I know that this was a little heavy, right? And I know it's feeling like we're hitting a point where we need to have some difficult conversations. This episode is only going to be the first of several that I will do on this topic, so there's a lot more good perspectives on the way. Outside of that, what did you guys think? Was it helpful in helping you understand what's going on in the world? Did it give you some real tools of how to manage the stress of everything? What do you want to know more? How can we better help you be the positive impact on the world? Let us know down in the comments below. And for our closing thought and quote of the day, that's going to be coming from Plato, who said, "Reality is created by the mind. We can change our reality by changing our mind." Anyhow, that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Lux Via, my friends. All right. Let's see. Test. Mike, you guys hear me? What do we think? One button, two buttons, too salacious. You know what's the fun about doing all these videos is you guys get to see
all my acne and different hairstyles through every episode because I'm a grown-ass man and haven't figured out
which hairstyle I like yet. All right, this is gonna look great. Anyhow, yeah, let's do it.